This CyCast is provided to you by the Iowa State Letter Winners Club, bridging the gap between legend and legacy by engaging in our past to invest in our future.
Well, welcome everyone to our latest Iowa State CyCast, and we have a wonderful guest today, and former Iowa State running back Joe Henderson. And Joe is without a doubt one of the greatest running backs in Iowa State history. In 1987, he was first team All Big Eight. And in 87 and 88, he rushed for over 1,000 yards, making him one of only 9 players in school history to crack the 1,000-yard barrier twice. And he had a phenomenal career at Iowa State. And it's so great to have him as a guest and to reminisce about his time at Iowa State. Joe Henderson, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mike. Good to be here.
Yeah, well, I tell you what, it's been a long time, and I know a lot of Iowa State fans remember your exploits on the gridiron. And basically, let's just kind of get started from the beginning. You grew up in Louisville, correct? And then you moved to Chicago when you were 12. When did you start getting interested in football?
Oh, I think I was born interested in football. I love football ever since I can remember.
And then, you competed at Leo High School, correct? Which is a part of the, yep. And that's part of the really tough Catholic league. And, you're all a league there, at Leo High. When do you remember where you start getting noticed and recruiting for football scholarships?
That's interesting. My favorite sport was track, and I got more notice for track than I did football until I broke my ankle. And then my sophomore year, my coach told me some people were looking at me for football, and so it kind of took off from there. But I really wasn't thinking about a career in football because I wanted to, run track, obviously.
Yeah, and so did you get pushed toward football by your coaches then?
No, nobody really pushed me. I love football. I love the game. But track was just my sport, and it was a natural evolution. If you had speed, when I went to high school, in order to play where I was, you had to be in a track team. I mean, my starting receiver, flanker, myself, my quarterback, we all were sub 4 or 5s.
Yep.
And so if we didn't run track, I don't know if you'd have made the teams.
Yeah. Well, Jim Kreiner was the head coach at Iowa State at that time. What made you decide that Iowa State was the school for you to play football at?
That's a fantastic question. Coach Bennett recruited me, Phil Bennett.
Yep.
And I really connected with him. I was leaning towards Arizona or Kentucky. And, Coach Bennett was really fantastic. And on my recruiting trip, I talked to the school counselor. And, and funny, she, I don't know if it was scripted or whatever, but she told me that they really liked me and that she had inside information that some of the starting running backs before me would not make the grade. So
okay.
Now, in hindsight, I think that might have been a little script, but it worked.
It worked. It got you to Ames, Iowa.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you didn't redshirt your first year, did you?
No, I did not. I played all 4 years.
Yeah, so right away you saw the field, and as a sophomore, you started getting the ball a lot, and one of your big games is your sophomore year. I guess you could call it a breakout game. Was you had 73 yards against Kansas. Mm-hmm. How much did that help your confidence moving toward your later years in school?
As far as football, it was. I don't know if anybody could really play and compete at a college level, particularly at that time in the Big Eight was one of the prominent divisions, conferences. I don't know if you can be on a team and compete for a starting spot and not have confidence. My biggest challenge was staying healthy. That was always the opponent to me was health, because it's a grueling grind. It's a grind. I mean, it's intense, and your body takes a beating, and your mind takes a beating. So I think that was the element that I was most contentious with.
Yeah. Well, And I remember your senior year, and we'll talk about that later as you're in this podcast. But they had a team poster featured you lifting weights, and the one thing that was so noticeable is that even at that time you knew the value of taking care of your body, strength and conditioning, and I think a lot of players weren't doing that back then. When did you kind of decide that was going to be important to you, that you were going to get strong, lift weights, eat right, when a lot of other people weren't doing that?
Yeah. Well, I think you hit the nail on the head, except for the eat right, because I love my donuts and ice cream. But here's the thing: you're playing against the best. I mean, and your body is your protection in the past. And Coach Wilson, he had, he made all these signs and he posted information about those who came before us and how they succeeded by taking care of the body. And I was also inspired by, I don't know if you remember Herschel Walker, that natural bodybuilding poster that he had. And that was pretty inspiring. But I've always compared myself with the best. Not saying that I was, but I wanted to be like them. And I try to mimic what they did. My idol was Walter Payton, and he worked out in the gym like a beast.
Yep.
And so he was a model for me to follow. And I just tried to emulate that as best I could.
Yeah. Well, switching back to your sophomore year in 1986, when you were seeing the field a lot as running back, can you? I'm going to bring up a game from that year, and I want your recollections from it. You're at Missouri, and and you guys got a sizable lead late in the game, and Coach Kreiner sends out the field goal unit with, I believe, 2 seconds left to kick a field goal. What was the players' reaction when that happened?
I don't know if there was a reaction. I think they were too shocked to react.
Yeah.
I mean, it was been some banter back and forth in the media, and Coach Kreiner, that I remember, was a fighter. He wasn't going to take
Yeah.
He was just going to stand up for his players and his program. Personally, I didn't think it was necessary. But you back your coach, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, Mike, and this is where I differentiate from a lot of people. To me, the score, regardless of what numbers on the scoreboard, is always 1 or 0.
Yep.
If you score 100 points to 0, you still only have 1 victory. And so you can't run up the score because you can't get more than 1 victory in a game.
Yep.
And if you look at history, how many players that have broken records who were on successful teams that didn't play the second half? So when you talk about that in that perspective, yeah, we kicked the field goal. It may be seen as tasteless, but in the scheme of things, it's only 1 loss. You didn't put up the loss score. So that's how I look at things. It's a little bit different.
Yeah. How tough was that for you, Joe, and the team when, and I'm trying to remember, it was like 2 games left maybe in the season when Coach Kreiner got let go. How hard was that for you to keep playing, for the rest of the season with an interim coach? I think it was Chuck Banker, is that his name, right?
Yeah, Coach Banker, yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, I mean, it wasn't hard because my role didn't change. My instructions didn't change. What was impactful was the concern of next year.
Yeah.
What's going to happen? I mean, if you remember, that was, the Jeff Braswell controversy, and we were on probation after that, and it was really the momentum, if any, that we were starting to build kind of hit a wall. And essentially, my junior year, we had to start all over.
Yeah. Yep. And, speaking of your junior year, Joe, what were your initial thoughts when Iowa State hired Jim Walton to be your next head coach?
I didn't have any. He didn't recruit me. I looked him up, and he had coached Gaston Green and some other players and had some success. My initial thought was, I had to earn my position. We had to start over. He doesn't know who I am. He doesn't know squat about me and my work ethic. And my thought was, I'm going to make it hard for him not to play me.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and you kind of touched on this, Joe. The team was really severely handicapped with a loss of scholarships, on probation. But it seemed like that group of guys in '87 and '88, your last 2 years, really bonded together because you were depleted in numbers, but you guys kept fighting together, and it was pretty evident right away that Coach Walden was going to make you a primary focal point of the offense, right?
Well, I don't know if that was his plan. I know that the rules have changed. I remember back then, if I can remember correctly, you may know more than I, but I think you couldn't transfer. You had to lose a scholarship or lose a year. It was a little bit more challenging back then to transfer than it is now with the portal and everything. But we talked, and a few of us got together and said, what are you going to do, set a year and start over with a new coach that don't know you, or stay where you are? And so that was the mindset, at least for me. And my thoughts, Mike, was I'm here and I'm going to work hard, and it's going to be hard for this coach not to play me or not to even acknowledge who I am. And I think I worked harder than I ever worked in my life that summer, just because we were walking into the unknown with the coach.
Yeah. Well, you had a fantastic start to the 1987 season. You had 100-yard rushing efforts against Miami and UNI, but I think the nation started noticing Joe Henderson in that Kansas game, a 42-28 win, and you had 226 yards rushing and a pair of touchdowns. And at the time, it was the third best single game rushing effort in Iowa State history. What do you remember from that game?
It was a slow game. I mean, it was in slow motion. A lot of plays were in slow motion for me. And I remember talking with Barry Sanders, and I guess for him, every game was like that. Everything moved so slowly. And that was just, I guess you call it being in the zone.
Yeah.
But I just remember the lineman just blocked so well, and the receivers, Tom Schulte was crushing the cornerback, and Derek DeGennaro was it was just, everything just came into play.
Yeah.
And it was just, and I made a few bad reads, and I could have had more, but I'm still thinking about that. I want that play.
But that's a competitor in you.
We came together as a team. That game, that was fun. That was in Kansas. That was there.
Yeah. Well, the 1987 season, your first team All Big 8, and you had 1,232 yards rushing, which was the fifth best season total in Iowa State history at the time. And you were heading into your senior year, probably considered one of the best returning running backs in the nation. And the one thing that you were blessed with, Joe, is that you had some really good players on your team, and including the offensive line. And I know when you're talking about guys like Keith Sims and Gene Williams, how awesome was that for you to have two future really good NFL players block for you to help you out your career?
No, Keith was just his presence in the huddle. You mentioned, think about this. I mean, we had 54 scholarship players, 54. Yeah. And out of that 54, my fortune was have two of them on the offensive line how fortunate for me. But the confidence, I think we drew off each other. And D. Ross was in there.
Yep, a great receiver.
Yeah, and I think it was just that trust in each other. I remember Keith just said he had fan his hand behind his butt and saying, "Just get behind me, Joe." How do you deny that? I mean, Big Keith was plowing the road for you. You got to just walk in there.
Yeah. Well, some of the stuff I've read, Joe, is that you had some injuries going into your senior year with your toes. Is that right? And what happened on that? Was that something that happened in the summer?
No, I think it was. I can't remember the first and second game.
Okay.
I ended up getting turf toe and 2 toes.
I think a lot of turf toe happened on that field back then.
It did. It was pretty phenomenal.
It was concrete, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was pretty hard. But I had it in 2 toes, and my options were the red shirt or medical. I don't know. They was going to sit me out, and I'm not going to miss a game. That's just a pride thing. And so we worked mid-season, the 4 or 5 weeks. It started getting better, and then next to the last game, before the Oklahoma State game, I sprained my ankle really badly in that week of practice, and I ended up wearing a size 12 on my left shoe and 11 and a half on my right shoe.
Oh wow!
Because my ankle was swollen. I was not gonna come out. And Coach said, if you're not gonna make Coach Anderson, it was Norm Anderson at the time. He was like, Joe, if you can't go, I got to put somebody else. I said, no, it's one more play, Coach.
Yep.
And so I one more play my way through the whole game. We lost, but we were going against Oklahoma State and Barry Sanders, and funny thing about that, I was neck and neck with Barry until the third quarter. I think we had something like 130 yards apiece or whatever, and then before you know it, he had 290 yards, and I'm like, okay, that's why he's the greatest.
Well, and that was gonna be one of my questions down the road, Joe. But like, so your last game as a Cyclone was against Oklahoma State and Barry Sanders.
Yep.
And that was obviously Barry Sanders' Heisman Trophy winning year. You had over 100 yards rushing. I think Barry was like about 7 yards shy of 300.
Yeah.
Had you ever seen a talent like that in your life?
No, I'm gonna tell you about the 290 yards. He didn't get that to the fourth quarter. We were neck and neck.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he had some big runs in that fourth quarter. I remember that.
And then I said, okay, well, I'm done. When I tell you that slow motion, when he told me that he's in slow motion, the game's in slow motion. What he's saying is that he's moving at regular speed, but what he sees in his experience is that the players that are trying to catch him are moving in slow motion.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that is a phenomenal talent, and no, I haven't seen a talent like that. I played with Eric Dickerson, and he was very gifted. But my all-time favorite person to watch and was Barry Sanders, hands down.
Yeah. I always felt that your senior year in 1988 was kind of a forgotten team because you finished the year 5-6, and obviously going to that Oklahoma State game, had a chance to have a winning record.
Yep.
And especially with only 56 scholarships, is that what you said? Yeah.
54, yeah.
54. It really was an incredible season with a lot of really good players, and I can name some players. I mean, I'm just naming a few. You had Mike Bush, you had Marcus Robertson. I talk about Dennis Ross, Keith Sims, Gene Williams, yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That team was really good.
Don't forget Dirty Doe. Jeff Doe was a missile.
Jeff Doe, great player. Yeah, and that really was a really good team, wasn't it, Joe?
I thought so, and not necessarily wins and losses of points, but just the competitiveness, which represents the spirit of collegiate football or collegiate athletics. Yeah. It's to compete at a high level. You're not causing issues on the field, and that, to me, you can hang your hat on. We can keep our heads held high because of how we played the game.
Yeah. Well, 1983, way before you got there, Iowa started their streak against Iowa State, and most of those games were blowouts.
Yeah.
But in '88, you guys went down to Kinnick, and it went right down to the final play.
Yeah.
And I know it was a loss, but what were your memories from that game? Because most of those games prior to that weren't even close. But you guys went toe to toe with a really, really good Iowa team in Kinnick that day.
Yeah, I remember that, and that's another game. There's 2 plays I would take back. I remember what they are. I can see it, but what we did, Mike, is in my opinion, my humble opinion, is that we sent a message. We sent a message to those who were being recruited after our senior year. We sent a message that we are doing this. We are competing with you with 54 scholarship players and the grit and guts of the walk-on players. And so beware, because it's going to keep coming. And they recruited Blaze Bryan and then Troy and it started to pick up after that. And I think by us staying after Coach Walter or Coach Kleiner was fired, you know, in my opinion, like we started building a foundation, a structure of not only competitiveness but the will to win. And I think that's where it started in that 1987-88 year.
I totally agree. And I bumped into Coach Walton a couple years ago, and he told me a really funny story about that '88 game. Mm-hmm. He said that the team's warming up, and there's only like 50 some guys on the field, and one of Coach Fry's assistants went up to Coach Fry and goes, "Hey, I think Iowa State's pulling a fast one on us. They only got like half their team out there." And supposedly Coach Fry goes up to Coach Walton, and he was kind of not really angry. He goes, "Hey, what are you doing to us? Where are your guys at?" And Coach Walton goes, "That's my team. That's all I got." And I think he was stunned because he didn't realize, how small of a team that was.
Yeah.
It was really tiny. But you guys had, like you said, you guys had a lot of toughness and grit, and you just kept fighting. In one game I want to talk to you about from that '88 season was again against Kansas, which you obviously every time you played Kansas you had a really good game. But this one was different. You at the time became the first Cyclone in school history to score 5 touchdowns in a game. Now that record's been equaled by Troy Davis and Joel Lanning, but you still shared the record, Joe.
Yeah.
I mean, I know that you're a humble guy and you probably don't think about stuff like that, but when that happened, did you go, "Wow, that's pretty amazing"?
No, I never really celebrate that success. I appreciate my efforts and what was accomplished. But what I saw is that this is what we would have been capable of had we had a full team.
Yeah.
This is what we could have done. And for me in that game, the cool feeling I had was when Coach Norm Anderson called me out. We were like 3rd or something and 2 on the goal line, and I could have got a 6 touchdown, and he put Paul Thibodeau in, and Paul scored, and I was more pumped that Paul scored.
Yeah.
Because that kid worked. I mean, Paul worked his butt off too, right? And everybody got a chance to participate, and it was fun. The fans, you look up in the stands, and the fans were going wild.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I wasn't a big celebratory type of person. I don't know if you remember that, but that wasn't who I was. I would rather watch my teammates celebrate, and
yeah.
Besides, I was probably too tired.
Well, Paul was a fellow Chicagoan like you. So that season ended, and you're all Big 8 again, and you rushed for over 1,000 yards for the second time.
Yeah.
And like I talked about earlier, only 9 players in Iowa State history have ever done that, and I'm going to name them off to you. Okay, I'm going to name them off to you. We got Mike Strawn, Dexter Green, Dwayne Crutchfield, Troy Davis, Darren Davis. You got Ennis Haywood, David Montgomery, and Brees Hall. That's a hell of a list.
Yeah,
that's a hell of a list. How does it feel to be on that list?
And I'm proud. I mean, now that I'm old and over the hill, I look back and I'm really appreciative of it. I think that I hope I've done something in my career to inspire those who followed me. And I think that when you do that, you keep building the foundation for the future. And I hope I had a small brick in that short list of players. So. Yep.
Yeah. Joe, tell me about your NFL career. You got drafted by the Saints. Did you attend camp and everything? And how did that all play out?
No, I was drafted by the Saints. I thought I had an effective preseason, but I ended up getting cut and then picked up by the Colts. Played 2 seasons with them. Subsequently, I was drafted first round by the Birmingham Fire in the World League, and I played with them. And then ended up going to Barcelona, playing with them for a season. Ended up in the World Bowl, the first one, and had a pretty good experience. And then I think what happened to me, Mike, was my concussions caught up to me. And it just once you get that in your head, it's really hard to come back from. And as you see now, the big concern with concussion.
Yeah.
But I had quite a few concussions. Yeah, I had quite a few. Because I ran differently. I didn't run like I was 200 pounds. You know,
Yep.
that's my dog barking.
That's okay.
Sergeant, come here. Sorry about that, Mike. But yeah, that's that. I'm not afraid to play ball with anybody. But when you are um, running a football in the NFL and you got those linebackers and you start to get a little tentative because you don't want to get another concussion, that's time to quit.
Yeah. Well, obviously, education was always very important to you, Joe, and you have your doctorate in business administration now. What schools did you get your postgraduate degrees at?
I got mine for Howard Taft, my doctorate, and then University of Phoenix, my master's.
Okay.
Um, and here's the thing, Mike, any young players or young kids if they listen to this, I went to school because it was required to play football, and then I learned that being a student was okay too, right?
Yep.
And so my message is, if I have an opportunity just to say, hey, football sports is great, but it's such a small percentage of those that can make it post college or post high school even. But take your grades seriously. Do something you like. Get good grades. Go to school. And it may not be the choice career path that you take, but man, it can open up some doors for you.
Yeah. Well, it obviously opened a lot of doors for you. And tell us about your current job. With Joe Henderson. Joe Henderson Associates in Salt Lake City.
Mm-hmm.
And is this where you kind of help out in your, it's called confidential situational management? Is that what it is?
Yeah, basically what I do, Mike, is I work with organizations and building a culture of effectiveness. And I just finished my book. It's being edited now. And when I go on, I evaluate the culture. There's so many companies that really need to look at how they are treating their employees, leaders who are leaders because of tenure. But what I try to find is opportunities to create, like kind of referencing back to what you said about the 87, 88 team, is forming that bond. How can you work effectively together? How can you be productive when the numbers are against you? And how can you produce with that? And I think that's I learned a lot from sports, and I carry that over in my coaching sessions with some of these CEOs and leaders.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, Joe, and it's been fun to watch your career. And, like we talked about earlier, you're going to come back to Ames in the fall, and you haven't been back since the 1990s. A two-part question: how excited to come back to see? Because I'm telling you what, it does not look the same the last time you were here. And two, do you still follow Iowa State football religiously?
I don't follow it religiously. I follow it. I was that last Iowa game. I was like, on tooth and nails. That was a very interesting game.
Yeah.
I follow the players. I think Coach Campbell's done a wonderful job. The fans are always diehard. And my concern of coming back, I hope I don't get competitive and I want to be calm and enjoy the game. I don't want to be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I can tell you right now, I think you're going to be shocked when you see campus, and when you do get here, we can't wait to show you all the new places. And so, Joe, thanks so much for joining us on this CyCast. It's been so great to catch up with you and your career.
Mike, thank you for interviewing me and talking to me, and I appreciate it.